I want to go to my next guest, Shobhan Saxena. How you doing, Shobhan? You doing okay this morning?
Hi, Jamal. I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing well. Shobhan, he's an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. In a career spanning more than 30 years, he has reported on the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he's an international correspondent for DD India, the international channel for India's public broadcaster. In Sao Paulo, damn good food. Damn good food. Um, Shobhan, I guess there are two main things I want to hit. One has to do with Trump in the Caribbean, since you're in Brazil, and Lula effectively slamming Trump for going after Venezuela, Colombia, etc. And the other one I want to hit is this weird mythical conversation that Trump claimed that he had with Modi that apparently didn't exist, where Trump was claiming that, well, Modi said that he was going to cut Russian energy. And India comes out and is like, yeah, dude, no, we have no idea what you're talking about. Let's go to the first one first. Lula came out recently and gave what seems to be a fiery speech, effectively pointing out that, look, Venezuela is not going to be Brazil. Brazil is not going to be Venezuela. And this notion of Donald Trump effectively attacking Venezuela needs to stop. And right here it is. Damn it. There it was. Give me a take on that. I'm going to pull up the video. What is the sense that you're getting in Brazil on these attacks that are taking place in the Caribbean? I mean, Donald Trump has been murdering people in boats left and right, not just from Venezuela, from Colombia. There was a guy from Trinidad and Tobago. And this is completely lawless. And yet, I've seen very little pushback coming from the United States. And I've heard a bit more pushback coming out of Petro. Yeah. Give me a take on this. This was Lula's first comment that I heard on this. This was why I'm bringing this up.
Okay. It's a matter of great concern for the whole region, actually. I mean, if you look at the history of South America, there has not been a war in South America for more than 120 years. I mean, the last war happened in the 19th century between Paraguay and Brazil. And that was also not a big war. Of course, the Paraguay suffered a lot. And there's not been a war, except unless you consider here Lula talking about, Brazil will never be Venezuela, Venezuela will not be Brazil, and we are all different countries, we have own destiny. So basically he's responding to what's going on in the waters of Caribbean for the past few months. It's kind of muscle flexing, but it's no longer muscle flexing. They're actually attacking boats and so-called drug submarines, and nobody knows actually for real whether these people are drug smugglers or ordinary fishermen and people who are using their boats for fishing, for anything else. So I think it's a great concern, and it's very important because Lula is going to meet Trump in Malaysia, I think next week, during the APEC summit, which is going to happen very soon. So I think before meeting Trump, I think Lula is making his position, Brazil's position, and position of the most countries in South America very clear that nobody wants a war in South America. Now, let me put this in context. Of course, there has been some friction between the Lula government and Maduro government in Venezuela because after the last elections in Venezuela, the Brazilian government didn't recognize the election results immediately, and there has been some friction, to be honest. But that doesn't mean that that Brazil is okay with, or Brazil wants a war in South America, or wants the Americans to will approve of American attack on Venezuela. There's this line that Brazil will become Venezuela has been used repeatedly by the far right in this country because they try to brand Venezuela as a failed socialist model. And when they want to attack the Lula government, they often use that example. Oh, Venezuela has failed and Brazil will fail too if you have socialist policies. This is basically welfare policies, nothing socialist about it,
Yeah.
But I think, there has been strong statement from Lula, also the president of Colombia, because Colombia is much closer to Venezuela and it has Caribbean just there, that's the border. So I think people are concerned. But I think till now it's been muscle flexing, show of his strength. They're trying to scale. I think the larger picture here is the Americans, basically CIA, and they've openly admitted that it's a CIA. It's no longer a covert operation, it's an open operation. They want a regime change in Venezuela. That's it. By bringing the forces, the frigates and ships, and they're attacking these boats, and more importantly, the Nobel Peace Prize given to a politician,
Yes.
eh,
Yes.
who's at best a very shady character, and this is kind of irony because Donald Trump was expecting Nobel Peace Prize, and it went to Marina in Venezuela, and she dedicated the Peace Prize to Donald Trump. So I think this is basically a very typical Western plot: how to do regime change in an emerging or developing country. You give the Peace Prize to an opposition leader who has no credibility, who has lost elections, but she is supported by for a long time. It's not she's been working with the Americans since the time of George Bush Jr. No, I mean,
Yes.
so a long association. So they want, yeah, go on.
No,
Yeah,
no,
the
no.
question.
Please finish. I'm sorry. No, no.
Yeah,
Please
so
finish.
I think, yeah, Nobel Peace Prize, military at the gates, ships, um, using weapons, killing people. The whole idea is some kind of regime change operation in Venezuela. But in my opinion, it's not going to happen, and nobody's going to like it in South America. Maybe the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, may approve it, but I don't think there's any support from any other government. There are 12 countries in South America, and nobody wants a military conflict here, and nobody wants of this kind of regime change, forced regime change, with threat of military aggression and covert operations, and you throw in the Nobel Peace Prize also. Nobody's very happy about it. So
Yes.
that is the wider picture I'm talking about. Of course, there are people here in Brazil, the countries who support a regime change in Venezuela. No, people from the far right who closely aligned with the U.S. interest. They are, but that's a small group, small minority, and nobody wants a war in this region. There has not been a war. This is the kind of something very specific about South America. It's a peaceful continent. There's no big conflict. There are no frontiers which are disputed. People live, countries live with each other peacefully. So I
Mhm.
think this is nobody expecting it. Nobody wants it.
There's also this other element of the U.S. asserting almost like a paternal control over South America, which I would imagine, considering all the coups that the United States was responsible for, not to mention the kill squads, that this is deeply problematic in the way that they're looking at this. This is Gustavo Petro. He he has been very outspoken, especially to some of the people that Trump murdered were Colombians.
Le solicito al presidente Trump contener su codicia petrolera,
Contain his oil greed.
pensar en la humanidad,
Think about humanity.
pensar en la eficacia
Think
de
about the
una América
effectiveness of the greed
grande.
of America.
Una América grande es una América en
The great
donde los
America is one where the
pueblos que
people
habitan las
inhabiting the
Américas,
Americas,
desde
from
Alaska
Alaska to
hasta la
Patagonia,
Patagonia,
without
sin
exclusion,
exclusión, dialogan.
discuss the common problems. Obviously, he is talking about the wrong guy in this case, right? Do you see all of these countries coming together as I don't know, in some way to rebuff what Trump is doing here and working in coordination? Right now, they seem to be working, I'm not going to say cross purposes, but almost as singletons. And one of my guests, Esteban made the point of saying Latin America need to get themselves together because America is coming for them, like this new Monroe Doctrine 2.0. Have you seen an aggregation of energies in order to push back against what the U.S. is doing?
Yeah, it is happening, but slowly. Of course, this is the Monroe Doctrine on steroids.
Yeah.
It's very clear. I mean, it's ironic again. Donald Trump, when he was running for president, he was talking of America first and not getting involved in this forever wars and bringing peace to the world. And here's opening a new front, a front which has been not open for centuries. There has not been a war in this part of the world, except for if you consider the British war against Argentina in the Falkland Islands, which we call Malvinas here. But that was also a small conflict. But and Americans and the British had differences at the time because Americans, they have always considered South America to be their backyard. But I think the situation has changed a lot in the past 20, 30 years. There have been very popular governments here, big leaders like Lula, Petro, and in Chile and Chile, other countries, even Argentina, leaders like Cristina Kirchner, and they have really asserted their position very well. You know, they have asserted their strength. They have asserted the solidarity of the region very, very strongly. So I think there's a new sense of solidarity in this region. It's no longer, the Americans may consider this to be their backyard, but I think the South Americans don't see themselves as a backyard anymore. I mean, Brazil is a huge country. It's one of the top 10 economies in the world. It's a member of BRICS, member of G20. It's a growing economy, big country, 220 million people, fifth largest country in the world, fifth biggest democracy in the world. So it's not a joke taken from these countries. And it's very clear from what Petro was talking about, President Petro. It's about oil. Actually, Venezuela has huge reserves of oil. Brazil too. And Guyana has found, a new source of oil. So I think the South America can be self-sufficient, not only self-sufficient in petroleum, but they are net exporters of petroleum to other countries. Of course, Venezuela has been suffering these sanctions for years, and it's just basically, it's the sanctions which has destroyed their petroleum industry and badly affected their economy. It's not that it's a badly managed country. A country which is rich in energy resources, but you don't allow them to export it. What's going to happen? Of course, they're going to suffer. So that is a plan. I think the Americans, Middle East, the politics or geopolitics has always been around petroleum, petrodollar. I think they want to replicate the same model in South America. It's not going to be that easy because there's going to be resistance. And I think nobody here is, given the history of American interference in South America, the period of 1960s and 70s and 80s with the military dictatorships everywhere, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and very, very brutal military dictatorships. In Chile, everybody knows about it. And people are not very happy with the situation. So I think the American interference here is seen in a very, very negative way, and Americans, unfortunately, are not very aware of it. Of course, they're planning to, reduce their Atlantic relationship a bit. I don't see it happening because they're still, U.S. is very much part of NATO. They're interested in selling their arms and weapons to NATO. America is not going to withdraw from their position of global hegemon. I don't see that's happening either with Europe but I think they definitely have opened a new front in South America, and that is a matter of concern here.
Yeah, I can imagine. Let's move to India. This fascinates me to no end. The U.S. has a mistaken impression that a war that Russia considers to be existential is going to somehow be influenced with bluffs and threats, and that propaganda that is put to its own population is somehow going to affect other world leaders, as if Putin can't pick up the phone and says, "Hey, Modi, did you tell Trump this?" In which case Modi is going to say, "I have no idea what the hell he's talking about." Donald Trump recently came out trying to pressure Russia and said this, which I think my first response, I think I even tweeted it, like, this is nonsense until I get confirmation.
That's a big stop. So I was not happy that India was buying oil. And he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. Now I got to get China to do the same thing.
Who does he think let's start at the beginning. Did Trump have a conversation with Modi when Modi assured him that he was going to stop buying Russian oil?
I think, Jamal, there are two aspects to this statement. The first one, from this statement, is very clear. The objective of the Ukraine war is not about democracy, it's not human rights, it's about a planned destruction of Russia. Destroy Russian economy, the same thing, and a regime change in Russia. That was the objective from very beginning. I remember when the war had just started and Biden went to Poland and Romania, and he said, Putin cannot extend power. So right. That's what they were planning. They say that it will be a short war, and they expected it to be short war from their point of view. They thought that Russian economy will collapse and there will be a regime change, but it has not happened. And that is very, very disappointing for them. So all this pressure being put on India, China, other countries not to buy oil from Russia or to do business with Russia, I think they're definitely living in a fool's paradise, because the whole world, except for Europe and US, is doing business with Russia. It's not just petroleum. I mean, Russia is more engaged economically with the Middle East, with Africa, with Latin America, with other Asian countries. So I think because of American politics, you have to, it's all about managing headlines. They need to show they've done something. That's why Trump is saying he spoke to Indian Prime Minister and assured him. I mean, there's a very clear readout from the India's Ministry of External Affairs. They have not given any such commitment to US. And India has repeatedly said, not just once, that India will manage its energy security in their own interest. India doesn't need to worry about the interests of Europeans. And it's also, again, an irony. Europeans have been still buying gas from Russia. And for the past 20, 30 years, the whole European prosperities, especially the German and French and other countries, they have become prosperous buying cheap Russian gas. So are they going to return all that money back to Russia or other countries? So I think as an emerging country, as a developing country, India and China have an absolute right to buy petroleum or whatever they want to buy, arms and weapons from Russia, any other country. You can't put a check on them. You can't threaten them with tariffs and sanctions. And the tariff war is also not going anywhere. He's put 50% sanctions on India, on Brazil, 100% on China. What is the result? Nothing. It's not going to have any, of course, may have some negative impact in the short term. It's not going to have a long-term negative impact on Indian economy or Chinese or Brazilian economy or economy of any other emerging country. I think we've seen this film many times, it's the same film during Biden's time and Trump's time, the same film, putting pressure on India. And even if India cuts the, purchase of petroleum from Russia, for example, for the sake of imagination, how much is it? A few $1 billion? Do you think that's going to collapse the Russian economy? Right. Russia is a huge country. It's a very big economy. Russia is doing business with the whole world. And I think this is one thing they don't want to accept. And they don't want to tell their own people that the whole policy of trying to isolate Russia, which is always isolate Putin, they don't talk about Russia, has failed. Because the world is engaging more with Russia than it was engaging with Russia earlier. I think the Indian pharmaceutical companies, IT companies, everyone, I think I was in India recently for 15 days, and I saw how much things have going on between India and Russia in the positive sense. More trade, more business, more political engagement. President Putin will travel to India in November or December for the annual India-Russia meet, and we will see more announcements. India is going to buy more S-400 missile systems from Russia. So I think this kind of pressure hasn't worked. India has made very clear a number of times it won't work with India. Of course, it won't work with China, because as emerging countries, we need to consider about our national interests and not about European interests or American interests or the games, geopolitical games they want to play. It's not going to work.
Do you see this, let's say, reshuffling American economic interests, or let's say interests of India, away from the States with these sanctions, with these tariffs? Because I think the issue that Trump is going to run into is kind of the same issue with Russia, where you put so many sanctions on Russia. I think it's like 20,000, some absurd amount, where the Russian economy became somewhat self-sufficient in the way that it operated, meaning it didn't need America in this sense. Is this the same thing that you see taking place in regards to India, or for that matter, even Brazil, where the normal economic levers that would typically go to America or get trade from America is being redirected to other aspects of the world to compensate for it, up until the point where America is just not necessary and it's isolated among these countries?
I mean, that is what is, I think, worrying Washington and Brussels. They put like 1,400 sanctions, 14,000 sanctions, I think, against Russia.
Yeah.
Russia is not only Russia survived, Russia is thriving. So that proved that a country can do business with other countries. You don't need to depend on euro and dollar for your business. And then I think that's a big concern in Brussels and Washington, because the other countries are going to do the same. Of course, what is the attraction of doing business with the US and Europe is the currency, is stronger currency. But if you look at the numbers, I mean, US population is just 4% of the global population. And combined here, the US and Europe together is less than 10%. So we are talking about here 90% of humanity and growing countries. But Africa is a big possibility. Africa is growing, is a very, very vibrant continent. It's not the Africa of the old, that broken political systems and no economy. That's not true anymore. Asia has very big countries, a country like Indonesia with 260 million people, and other countries in the region, Latin America. So I think, and I've seen in Brazil, they put 50% tariff in Brazil on Brazilian companies. And what happened? They immediately diversified. More than 50 Brazilian coffee companies are now going to China to do business with China. And the Chinese are not coffee drinkers, but they're going to do business with China. So I think everyone is looking for more markets, more diverse system where people can do business with other countries and not solely depend on the US. So I think this tariff war started by Donald Trump has worked maybe with some countries like South Korea and Japan. Even then, also there was a lot of friction actually, but it's not going to work with big countries like China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia. It's not going to work with big countries. We have seen how the Chinese have reacted with the rare earth metals, restrictions on the export of rare earth metals, and there's an absolute panic in Washington about it. It's not, we're not in that scenario that without the US support or without doing business with US, you could not survive. Countries will survive. They look for alternative markets. They look for more markets. There'll be more engagement of trade without the use of dollar. That's again a positive thing, because if countries can not use so much dollar, I think that will reduce the burden on their foreign reserves. So I don't think, yes, short term, there could be a problem. The economies may be affected, but I was looking at the figures coming from China. There was a small dip in the trade in the last quarter, but now the Chinese economy is going up again. Because Jamal, also you have to realize, as countries like India and China and Brazil, they're very big countries. What drives their economy is the local economy. Local consumption is a very important part of the growth story. They're not solely dependent on export or trade, and especially not with the Europe and US. And India has signed free trade deals with a lot of countries, including Europe, and UK and other countries. And India is now in the process of having a free trade deal with South America as well. So I think it's in the long term, this is going to be good news for emerging and developing countries.
Where does BRICS fall into all of this? Because I have to be honest with you, the tariffs Donald Trump were effectively passing, I didn't think those had anything to do with the individual countries. I thought those had more to do with BRICS. Like Trump, oddly enough, of all presidents in the United States, acknowledges the dollar is under pressure. Now, no other president would admit this. Joe Biden wouldn't admit this. Obama wouldn't admit this. And this is despite the fact that the dollar, you can see it depreciating in value. And you can see it as a reserve currency, the amount of the dollar being used to depreciate. You can look at gold being at over 4,000 a bar at this point of $4,000, which again is pretty astonishing. I don't think gold has ever been this high. And so there's something going on in regards to the currency that Donald Trump seems to be responding to. And the way he's responding to it is by effectively attacking BRICS countries. I mean, if you look at the one with the highest tariffs, those countries belong to BRICS. He just can't do it with China in the way that he wants to. He can't assert its will. But South Africa, Brazil, India, etc.
Yeah, I think as I said correctly, he's the first American president to mention the word BRICS. I think I don't remember Biden or Obama even mentioning BRICS. But I think the people who are briefing Donald Trump on BRICS, they need to do a proper briefing, because he thinks that Spain is part of BRICS. And then he said, after his threat, countries are leaving BRICS, or nobody wants to join BRICS.
Yeah.
This is the exactly opposite of the reality. BRICS now has 20 members and more associate members, and more countries want to join BRICS. So BRICS is actually growing both in size and influence, and not not shrinking. So that is a completely wrong position. And also, I mean, and also he said the BRICS was formed to attack the dollar. Not true. I mean, BRICS has a bigger agenda or perspective. The purpose is not to attack dollar. Of course, the dollar has lost its position slowly and gradually over the past 30, 40, 50 years. And it will lose more, because the days of the hegemon are going to be over finally one day, if not in 5 years, in 10 years, And as countries become bigger and bigger economies like India, China, and Brazil and Russia, and if they want to do trade in their own currencies, you can't do much about it. You already have done the worst. You put 50% tariff, 100% tariff. What else can you do? Are you going to break relations with the with BRICS countries completely? That's going to have more effect on the US than on the BRICS countries, actually, because it's it's a mutual trade. You have US has $750 billion trade with China. Are you going to decouple with China? Who's going to suffer? China. You can destroy China, but at what cost? Self-destruction.
I agree with you that it depends on how cynical you're being in regards to whether or not the entire point was to go after the dollar. I agree with you. It may not be a feature, but it is a bug. Like, come on. I've heard Putin give speeches where Putin was making the point of saying, look, you guys have taken us off the SWIFT system. What are we supposed to do? Or Putin has even made speeches where he pointed out the US used $10 trillion, just made it out of thin air. And if you can create $10 trillion out of thin air, what can you do with that money? And how can any other country that has to deal with real economic realities compete? So if the US decides, well, we want to go to war and we want to spend $10 trillion to do it, what can another country do to contest with that when we're just making this stuff up as we go along? And so if you are coming up with a system where countries are going to engage with each other and engage with each other either in a new currency for themselves to use, or at the very least use their own basket of currencies when they're engaging with each other, as a direct result of that, the entire point of it is to get around the use of the dollar. So the dollar can't be used as a weapon in the way that the dollar is currently used. I guess I always hear BRICS countries say, look, our job is not to hit the dollar. And my thing is always, okay, maybe it's not a feature, but it's damn sure a bug. Give me your thoughts on that.
When tariff war started recently, and he was putting these tariffs on all the countries, and the country which started dumping the US bond was actually Japan, not China. And Japan is a very, very close, everybody knows, a close ally or satellite country of the United States. So I think it's very evident that people have realized, the countries have realized that this US bond doesn't have the power and strength it used to have. So basically, your countries are buying junk, actually. So you're spending your hard-earned money, your national currency, to buy bonds which has no value. So I think the decline of a US dollar is a reality, and this has been a reserve currency of the world for such a long time, 70, 80 years. It's not going to collapse in a day or two or a year or two, but I think the process has started. The process is gradual, and Americans know it, and that's why all this lot of rumors about they were trying to convert their debt into cryptocurrency and this and that, and what they're trying. So they're desperate, and Donald Trump himself talks about he's launching this golden Visa card and something because they want to earn money. And he said, if you can get money, you can repay the debt. So I think that is an elephant in the room in the US. $38 trillion of debt of a country whose GDP is $34-35 trillion. It's basically, in my opinion, a bankrupt economy, because it's not a real economy. With that much debt and your GDP less than your debt, what kind of economy is that? So I think that they're worried about, and the thing that if countries not give up dollar, it's not going to happen. But if they reduce the use of dollar, that's going to have a very negative impact on the US economy. That is why all this, show and drama and screaming about, BRICS and threat to dollar. Nobody is threatening dollar. I think that the biggest threat to dollar is the U.S. economy itself.
That and Trump using it as a weapon, or the Biden administration using it as a weapon. I think it's like any unassailable weapon is going to be challenged, right? Like if I get a nuke, at some point, somebody else is going to get a nuke because you have to balance it out. Or if you put a missile in space, okay, then I'm by definition going to have to put a missile in space because I need the ability to challenge the fact that you have that. I need a balancer. I need to have something to countermand the weapon that you have at your disposal. Well, the U.S. decided to use the dollar as a weapon. And this was against what we initially said we were going to do, by the way, when we first took this position of the dollar being the reserve currency. It's completely against it. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think we created a monster on this, and other countries were like, we do not want to be at the behest of the United States if they decide they don't like our foreign policy or they don't like something that we're doing. Look at what they did to Venezuela, for God's sake, right? So no, I agree with you on this. Where do you think this goes, by the way? Do you think these tariffs get rolled back? Do you think these tariffs are just a fact of life going forward, and these countries are just going to have to work around them until they get to the point where they have less impact? How do you think this resolves, or does it resolve? Does India come to some kind of agreement with the United States?
Yeah, I think that the trade talks between India and US have been going on for 9-10 months, and they've not reached an agreement. And the Indian position is very clear that India has to protect the core of its economic interest, the domestic market, the farmers, the dairy, poultry. India is not going to make a compromise on this issue. It's very, very clear. I think also countries like Brazil and China have taken very clear position. I think what has happened, Jamal, because the tariff wars, the world has realized that the US is not a reliable trading partner. You can't do trade with the country and keep threatening them all the time, hiking the tariff, then roll it back. The business trade doesn't work like this. And that's why the countries are now looking for alternative markets. They're looking for new sources to buy things from, and also new markets where they can buy their stuff. Because till the tariff war is going on, how can you have any business with them? And has he managed to deal with, as he said, he'll sign in 90 days with 100 countries. How many countries can he sign deal with?
It's like two, like the European Union, maybe.
Yeah, European Union, which is basically a vassal of the United States, and South Korea and Japan also, again, vassals of the United States. But the countries which are developing, emerging, they need to protect their economy, and they're not going to buckle under pressure from Donald Trump on this issue.
And Shobhan, always appreciate these conversations, man. Thank you for this. You are a fantastic reporter.
Thank you.
I got to be honest, I miss doing that for the every so often the show with media locations to be a reporter. I used to love that, like being on location and being able to kind of get the details. So I thank you for this. I appreciate it. Shobhan Saxena, he is a good friend of the show. He is an Indian journalist based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, in a career spanning more than 30 years. I can't believe you've been doing this for 30 years. That is fantastic. He has reported from the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, various other publications in India. Right now, he is an international correspondent for DD India, international channel of India's public broadcaster. Shobhan, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. Be safe, okay?
Thank you for the invite, and nice to talk to you again.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.